The fire had left more than burned scars on Sarah Jane's body when she was 12 years old. It had branded shame into her heart that 10 years of living hadn't dimmed. And now, at 22, she stood in the Mercantile in Winslow, Arizona territory, pretending she didn't notice how Mrs. Henderson's eyes lingered on the twisted pink flesh that climbed from Sarah's collar to her jawline. It was June 1882, and the desert heat made long sleeves unbearable, but Sarah wore them anyway, pulling the cuffs down over her wrists where more scars wound like rope burns up to her elbows. "Such a shame," Mrs. Henderson whispered to her daughter, loud enough for Sarah to hear while she selected fabric for a new dress. "Pretty enough face otherwise, but no man wants damaged goods. Those scars tell everyone she's been touched by misfortune, and men fear that kind of bad luck will rub off." Sarah's fingers tightened on the bolt of blue calico, her jaw clenching. She'd heard variations of this speech her entire adult life, from well-meaning church ladies who suggested she'd be better off accepting spinsterhood with grace, from her own aunt, who'd raised her after the fire took her parents and their small ranch house, telling her to lower her expectations, perhaps consider a widower with children who couldn't afford to be particular, from the young men in town who'd look at her with interest until they saw the scars, then found pressing business elsewhere. She paid for her fabric and left quickly, stepping out into the blazing Arizona sun. Winslow wasn't much to look at, just a scattered collection of buildings along the railroad line, but it was home. The little Colorado River ran nearby, providing just enough water to sustain the town and the ranches that dotted the surrounding territory. Sarah lived on one such ranch with her aunt and uncle, the Johnsons, earning her keep by cooking, cleaning, and helping with the books. The walk back to the ranch took an hour, and Sarah used the time to compose herself. She wouldn't let them see they'd gotten to her. She was used to it. The scars ran from her right shoulder down her arm, across part of her chest and neck, climbing up to kiss her jawline. The result of being trapped in her bedroom while the house burned, of her father breaking through the window and pulling her out through flames. He and her mother had gone back for her baby brother. None of them had come out again. Sarah was nearly to the ranch when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. She moved to the side of the dusty road, expecting whoever it was to pass, but instead the rider slowed. "Afternoon, miss." She looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. The man on horseback was a stranger, tall in the saddle with broad shoulders and a weather-worn face that suggested he spent more time outdoors than in. His hat was tilted back, revealing dark hair and eyes that were an unusual shade of green. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with a strong jaw and a straight nose. A cowboy, clearly, from the way he sat his horse to the dust on his boots. "Afternoon," Sarah replied cautiously. "I'm looking for the Johnson Ranch. Been told they might have work for a hand willing to stay through the summer." "You're nearly there," Sarah said, pointing ahead. "Another quarter-mile, you'll see the gate on the left." "Much obliged." He smiled, and it transformed his face entirely. "Name's Kade Dalton. Would you be heading that way? I'd be happy to give you a ride, save you the walk in this heat." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her collar, checking that it covered what it should. "I'm fine walking, Mr. Dalton. I live there, so I'll see you when you arrive." Something flickered in his eyes, curiosity maybe, but he just tipped his hat. "As you prefer, miss. I'll see you shortly then." He rode ahead, and Sarah watched him go, trying not to notice how he sat his horse with easy confidence, or how his voice had been warm without being forward. It didn't matter. Once he saw the scars properly, once someone told him about the fire and the bad luck that followed her, he'd look at her the same way every other man did. If he took the job, which her uncle would likely offer since good ranch hands were hard to find. She'd make sure to stay out of his way. When Sarah arrived at the ranch house 15 minutes later, Kade Dalton was already talking with her Uncle Robert by the barn. Her Aunt Martha was on the porch shelling peas, and she looked up as Sarah approached. "That young man seems capable," Martha said. "Robert's going to hire him on. We need the help with the new horses." Sarah nodded. Her uncle bred and trained horses, good stock that sold well to the army and to ranchers throughout the territory. It was hard work, and they'd been short-handed since their last worker had left to try his luck in the silver mines. "I'll get supper started," Sarah said, escaping into the house. She was elbow-deep in biscuit dough when she heard boots on the porch. Male voices, her uncle's and the new hands. They came into the kitchen, and Sarah kept her eyes on her work. "Sarah, this is Kade Dalton. He'll be staying in the bunkhouse working with the horses." "Kade, this is my niece, Sarah Jane. She keeps the house and does the cooking, and she's got a head for numbers better than mine." "Miss Sarah," Kade said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "We met on the road." "Mr. Dalton," Sarah acknowledged, still not looking up. "Supper at 6, Robert said. "You'll eat with us in the house. Breakfast is at 5, lunch at noon." "Appreciated, sir." The men left, and Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It would be fine. She'd serve meals and keep to herself. And in a few months, Kade Dalton would move on like cowhands always did. Except it didn't work out that way. Kade Dalton proved to be different from the start. At that first supper, he sat across from Sarah at the table and made polite conversation with her aunt and uncle. He'd come from Texas, he said, worked ranches there and in New Mexico before heading to Arizona. He was 25, had no family to speak of, and knew horses like some men knew scripture. "You've got good stock, Mr. Johnson," Kade said, accepting a second helping of stew that Sarah ladled into his bowl. She was careful to keep her scarred right side away from him, serving from his left. "That bay stallion has excellent conformation." "Thunder's my pride," Robert agreed. "Sarah named him, actually. She's got away with the horses." "Do you ride, Miss Sarah?" Kade asked, and politeness forced her to look at him. His green eyes met hers with genuine interest, no trace of pity or discomfort. But he hadn't seen the scars yet, not properly. The kitchen was dim with only lamplight, and she was being careful. "When I have time," she answered. "There's a mare, Juniper, who's mine." "Maybe you could show me the property lines tomorrow," Kade suggested to Robert. "Get my bearings." "Sarah could do that," Robert said, and Sarah's heart sank. "I need to go into town for supplies. She knows every inch of this ranch probably better than I do." "I wouldn't want to take Miss Sarah from her work," Kade said, but Robert waved that off. "Do her good to get out. She's always working. Tomorrow after breakfast, Sarah, you take Mr. Dalton on a tour of the ranch." There was no polite way to refuse, so Sarah nodded, already planning. She'd wear her highest collar and her hat with the wide brim. She'd keep the tour brief and professional. It would be fine. That night, lying in her narrow bed in the small room off the kitchen, Sarah stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about green eyes and a warm smile. It didn't matter. It never mattered. The scars always won in the end. Morning came too soon. Sarah was up before dawn as always, starting breakfast while the sky was still gray. She wore a high-necked blouse buttoned to her throat despite the early heat, and a split riding skirt for the tour. Her hair was pinned up tightly, not a strand out of place. Kade appeared at 5 on the dot, already washed and ready for the day. In the morning light, Sarah could see him more clearly. He was handsome in a rugged way, with calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he found joy where he could. He thanked her for the coffee she poured, complimented the biscuits and gravy, and talked easily with her uncle about the day's plans. After Robert left for town and Martha went to tend her kitchen garden, Sarah found herself alone with Kade by the barn. Juniper was already saddled, and Kade was seeing to a gray gelding her uncle had assigned him. "Beautiful morning," Kade said as they mounted. "I've been in Arizona territory a few weeks now, and I'm starting to appreciate the landscape. It's different from Texas." "How so?" Sarah asked, keeping Juniper on the far side of the gray so Kade was to her left. "More open somehow. Sky seems bigger. And the colors at sunrise, those purples and oranges, there's something special." They rode in silence for a while, Sarah pointing out boundaries and water sources, explaining which pastures were used for what. Kade listened attentively, asked intelligent questions, and seemed to genuinely want to learn the operation. They were near the eastern border of the ranch, where a stand of cottonwoods marked a seasonal creek, when disaster struck. A rattlesnake, hidden in the rocks, buzzed its warning too late. Juniper reared and Sarah, caught off guard, fell hard. She hit the ground on her right side and felt her carefully buttoned collar tear open. "Sarah," Kade was off his horse in an instant, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt? Don't move, let me check." "I'm fine," Sarah gasped, trying to catch her breath. The fall had knocked the wind from her lungs, but nothing felt broken. "Just let me." His hands were gentle as he helped her sit up, and then she saw his eyes widen slightly as he took in what the torn blouse revealed. The scars were fully visible now, the twisted flesh of her shoulder and upper chest, the marks climbing up her neck. Sarah felt her face burn with humiliation. She tried to pull away to cover herself, but Kade's hand caught hers gently. "You're not hurt from the fall?" he asked, his voice steady. "No, I'm fine." She couldn't meet his eyes. "Please, I need to. Your blouse is torn," he said matter-of-factly. He shrugged out of his vest and handed it to her. "Here, put this on." Sarah took the vest with shaking hands and pulled it on over her ruined blouse, buttoning it with fumbling fingers. She waited for it, the awkwardness, the pity, the carefully averted eyes. Instead, Kade stood and offered his hand to help her up. When she was on her feet, he checked her over with the same calm efficiency he might use with a horse, making sure she wasn't favoring any limbs, that nothing was sprained or broken. "Let's get you back to the house," he said. "We can finish the tour another day." They rode back in silence, but it wasn't the comfortable silence from before. Sarah felt the weight of exposure, of being seen. She'd been so careful, and now this stranger knew. Soon everyone would know if they didn't already. He'd probably ask her uncle for a different guide or make excuses to avoid being around her. At the barn, Kade helped her dismount, his hands steady at her waist. "You should have Mrs. Johnson look at any bruises," he said. "That was a hard fall." "Thank you," Sarah managed, taking back his vest. "Keep it for now," he said, "until you can change." She nodded and fled to the house, not looking back. In her room, Sarah examined the damage. Dark bruises were already forming on her hip and shoulder, but nothing serious. The blouse was beyond repair, the fabric torn right at the collar. She changed into a fresh one, this one even higher-necked, and tried to compose herself. When she emerged to start lunch preparations, she found Kade at the kitchen table, apparently waiting. He stood when she entered. "Miss Sarah, I wanted to apologize." She stared at him. "Apologize?" "I should have been watching for snakes. I know they're common in this territory, and I should have warned you when we got near those rocks. Your fall was my fault." "It wasn't," Sarah said, bewildered. "It was just bad luck. The snake was hidden." "Still, I'm sorry you were hurt." He shifted his weight, suddenly looking less certain. "And I hope I didn't overstep helping you like that. I just wanted to make sure you were all right." Sarah searched his face for signs of disgust or pity, but found only genuine concern. It made something ache in her chest. You didn't overstep, she said quietly. Thank you for the vest, of course. He smiled then, that same warm smile from yesterday. I'll get out of your way, let you work in peace. He left, and Sarah stood in the kitchen, completely confused. He'd seen the scars. He'd seen them fully in broad daylight, and he was acting like nothing had changed. Like she was just a person who'd taken a fall, not damaged goods marked by misfortune. The afternoon passed, and then supper. Kade was polite as always, talking with Robert about the horses, complimenting Sarah's cooking. He didn't treat her any differently, didn't avoid looking at her or make a point of not looking at the scars that her collar hid. The next day was Sunday, and the Johnsons went to church as they always did. Sarah pleaded a headache and stayed home, as she often did when she couldn't face the stares and whispers. She was in the kitchen, enjoying the quiet house, when Kade appeared. I thought you'd gone to town, Sarah said, startled. Not much for church, Kade admitted. Hope that doesn't shock you. I'm not shocked. Sarah turned back to the bread she was kneading. I'm not much for it either, because of the scars. The question was direct but not unkind. Sarah's hands stilled in the dough. What do you know about them? Nothing, except that you have them. Kade leaned against the doorframe, his posture relaxed. I thought maybe you'd want to talk about it, but if not, that's fine too. Why would you want to know? Sarah asked, her voice harder than she intended. So you can tell yourself that sad story before you look away like everyone else. Kade was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. I'm not planning on looking away, Sarah. The use of her first name sent a shiver through her. She forced herself to resume kneading, concentrating on the rhythm of push and fold. There was a fire when I was 12. I got burned getting out. My parents and little brother died. That's all there is to it. That's not all, Kade said. That's what happened to you, but it's not all you are. Sarah did look up then, found him watching her with those steady green eyes. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, he agreed, but I know what I see. I see a woman who runs a household, keeps perfect books, rides well enough that it took a hidden rattlesnake to unseat her, and makes the best biscuits I've had in 3 territories. The scars are there, sure, but they're just part of the whole picture. That's easy for you to say, Sarah said, her throat tight. You haven't heard what people say, what they think. What do they say? That no man wants a woman with scars, that I'm damaged goods, that misfortune follows me and will follow anyone foolish enough to tie themselves to me. The words tumbled out, bitter and familiar. Kade pushed off the door frame and walked closer, stopping on the other side of the table. Well, I've been called foolish before, and it's usually been accurate. So maybe you shouldn't listen to what people say. Despite herself, Sarah felt her lips twitch. You should listen to them. They're probably right. Are you telling me you're bad luck? Kade asked, and there was a teasing note in his voice now. Because so far, since I met you, I've gotten a good job, excellent meals, and the company of an interesting woman. Doesn't seem like bad luck to me. You fell off your horse yesterday because of me. You fell off your horse. I was fine. He grinned. If anything, you're the one having bad luck around me. Sarah found herself smiling despite everything. That's not how it's supposed to work. Maybe it's time to write new rules. For the next few weeks, Kade seemed determined to prove his point. He sought Sarah out during breaks from his work, asking her opinion on the horses, requesting her help with reading some letters he'd received. She learned that he'd taught himself to read later in life and still struggled with longer words. In return, he helped her with heavy lifting in the kitchen, fixed the wobbly step on the back porch without being asked, and made her laugh with stories about his misadventures on other ranches. So there I was, he said one evening after supper, while Sarah washed dishes and he dried, hanging from this tree branch with an angry bull below me, my horse halfway to Mexico, and I'm thinking this is it. This is how Kade Dalton meets his end." "What did you do?" Sarah asked, giggling despite herself. "Well, I waited until the bull got bored and wandered off. Then I dropped down and walked 3 miles back to the ranch in my socks because I'd lost my boots in the mud." "In your socks?" "What was left of them by the time I got back." He shook his head ruefully. "Boss took one look at me and docked my pay for losing the boots, said I should have held onto them better while running for my life." Sarah laughed, really laughed, and was surprised by how good it felt. When was the last time she'd laughed like this? She couldn't remember. Martha, sitting in the corner with her mending, watched them with knowing eyes but said nothing. It was late July when things shifted. The heat was oppressive, and Sarah was bringing water to the men working with the horses in the corral. Kade took the ladle gratefully, drinking deep, and when he handed it back, his fingers brushed hers. "Thank you," he said, and his eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. Sarah felt heat that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun rise in her cheeks. She retreated quickly, confused by the flutter in her stomach. That night, lying in bed, she forced herself to face the truth. She was developing feelings for Kade Dalton. Real feelings, dangerous feelings, and that was foolish beyond measure. He was kind to her now, yes, but he was a drifter. He'd move on eventually, find a ranch somewhere else, maybe a pretty girl without scars to marry. This was temporary. She needed to protect her heart, but the heart, Sarah was learning, didn't listen to logic. August arrived with thunderstorms that brought brief relief from the heat and turned the landscape green. Sarah made a point of being less available, of keeping conversations shorter, of maintaining distance. Kade noticed. She could tell, but he didn't push. He just continued being kind, being there, being impossible to ignore. The breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon when everyone had gone to town except Sarah and Kade. Sarah was in the kitchen as always, and Kade found her there. "Why won't you go to town?" he asked without preamble. "I have work to do. It's Sunday. The work can wait." He crossed his arms. "Is it because of how people look at you?" "Don't," Sarah said sharply. "Don't what?" "Don't notice that you hide here. Don't care that you let other people's small-minded opinions keep you from living your life." "You don't understand." Sarah turned away from him, gripping the edge of the counter. "You don't know what it's like to have people stare, to whisper, to tell you that you're not good enough, not whole enough, not worth anything because of something that happened that you couldn't control." "You're right," Kade said, his voice softer now. "I don't know what that's like, but I know what I see when I look at you, Sarah. Don't." The word came out as a plea. "Please don't. Don't say kind things you don't mean. Don't give me hope when there isn't any. Just leave it alone." "What if I can't leave it alone?" He moved closer, and she could feel his presence behind her. "What if I've tried and I can't?" "You'll move on eventually," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Cowboys always do. You'll go to another ranch, another town, and you'll forget all about the scarred woman who cooked your meals for a summer." "Sarah, look at me." She shook her head, tears threatening now. "Please, look at me." Slowly she turned. He was closer than she'd realized, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. What she saw there made her breath catch. "I'm not going anywhere," Kade said. "And I'm not going to forget you. How could I forget the woman who makes me laugh every day? Who's taught me more about horses than I learned in 25 years? Who's strong enough to survive what would break most people, and kind enough to still see good in the world?" "Kade," he lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her scarred cheek. His thumb traced the edge of the burn mark that climbed her jaw, his touch feather light. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "These scars, Sarah, they're not ugly. They're not something to be ashamed of. They're proof that you survived. They're part of your story, and your story is beautiful." Sarah's tears spilled over then. You don't mean that. You're just being kind. I mean every word. His other hand came up to frame her face, his fingers tracing the scars on her neck with reverent gentleness. Every single word. You are beautiful, Sarah Jane. Scars and all. Especially with the scars because they make you who you are. People say, I don't care what people say. He leaned his forehead against hers. I only care what I know, and I know I'm falling in love with you, have been for weeks now. Sarah's world tilted. You can't. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and smart and funny and kind. I know you make the best coffee in Arizona territory and you're terrible at poker. That startled a wet laugh from her. I know you sing when you think no one's listening and you talk to the horses like they understand every word. I know you deserve someone who sees all of you, not just the parts that are easy to look at. I have nightmares, Sarah whispered. About the fire. I wake up screaming sometimes. Then I'll be there to remind you you're safe. I'm afraid, she admitted, of trusting this, of believing you mean it. I know, Kade said gently, but I'm patient. I can wait while you learn to trust it. He pulled back slightly, his hands dropping from her face, and Sarah immediately missed his touch. He smiled at her, soft and sweet. I should get back to work, he said, but I want you to think about something. Next Sunday there's a dance in town. I'd like to take you. Kade, I can't. Everyone will stare. Let them stare. Let them see that I'm the luckiest man in Winslow because I have the most beautiful woman in Arizona territory on my arm. You're insane. Possibly, he agreed cheerfully. Think about it. After he left, Sarah sank into a chair, her legs shaky. He'd called her beautiful, had traced her scars with tender fingers and called them beautiful, had said he was falling in love with her. It was too much, too good, too terrifying. When Martha returned from town, she found Sarah still sitting at the table, staring at nothing. You all right, dear? Martha asked, setting down her basket. He said he's falling in love with me. Martha smiled. Took him long enough to say it. I've known for weeks. How could you know? The way he looks at you when you're not watching. The way he finds excuses to be near you. The way he talks about you when you're not there. Martha sat down across from Sarah. That boy is head over heels and has been since he got here. But the scars, that boy doesn't see scars when he looks at you, Sarah. He sees you, all of you. The question is, can you let yourself see what he sees? Sarah shook her head. I don't know how. Start by giving him a chance. Go to that dance with him. Everyone will talk. They'll talk anyway. They always do. Martha reached across and took Sarah's hand. But maybe it's time to stop living your life based on what other people think. Time to take a chance on something good. The week that followed was strange. Kade didn't mention the dance again, didn't push for an answer. He just continued being himself, kind and patient and present. He brought Sarah wildflowers he found by the creek, helped her hang laundry when the wind was too strong for her to manage alone, and sat with her on the porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. And slowly, Sarah began to believe. Began to think that maybe, just maybe, this could be real. On Saturday evening she made her decision. I'll go, she told Kade when she found him in the barn, brushing down thunder. He turned, his face lighting up. Yeah. She twisted her hands in her apron. But I don't have anything suitable to wear. My dresses are all plain, and you'll be the prettiest woman there no matter what you wear, Kade said firmly. But if you want something new, there's time to get fabric and make something tomorrow. The dance is tomorrow. Then we'll go another time. There'll be other dances. Sarah stared at him. You'd wait, not go tomorrow. Sarah, I don't care about the dance. I care about being with you. If that's at a dance tomorrow or a month from now or just sitting on the porch, it doesn't matter to me. And that more than anything made Sarah's decision final. I have fabric, she said. Blue calico. I can work fast. I'll have something ready by tomorrow evening." She did work fast, staying up half the night with Martha's help. The dress was simple but flattering, with a higher neckline than was fashionable but not so high as to look strange. It brought out the blue of Sarah's eyes, and when she looked at herself in the mirror on Sunday evening, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: hope. Cade's expression when he saw her made the sleepless night worth it. His eyes went wide and he just stood there for a moment, speechless. "You look." He swallowed. "Sarah, you're absolutely beautiful. It's just a simple dress." "I'm not talking about the dress." The drive into town was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence. Cade kept the wagon horses to an easy pace, and every so often Sarah felt him glance at her. She kept her eyes forward, trying to calm her racing heart. The dance was being held in the largest building in town, the community hall that also served as a school and church when needed. Music was already spilling out into the street when they arrived, and Sarah could see couples dancing through the windows. "We don't have to go in," Cade said quietly. "We can turn around right now if you want." Sarah looked at him, at his honest, open face, at the way he was watching her with concern and care. She thought about all the years she'd hidden, all the opportunities she'd missed, all the life she'd let slip by because she was afraid of what people would say. "No," she said firmly. "I want to go in." Cade's smile could have lit the whole territory. He jumped down from the wagon and came around to help her down, his hands sure at her waist. Then he offered his arm like she was a fine lady, and together they walked into the dance. The conversation didn't stop exactly, but it did dip for a moment. Sarah felt eyes turn toward them, saw the surprise on faces. Mrs. Henderson's mouth actually fell open. The preacher's wife looked scandalized, but Cade just walked Sarah to the refreshment table with his head high, got them both cups of punch, and then led her onto the dance floor. "I should tell you," he murmured as he took her hand, "I'm not a great dancer." "Neither am I," Sarah admitted. "Then we'll stumble through it together." They did stumble a bit, but it didn't matter. Sarah was aware of the whispers, the stares, but Cade kept her attention on him. He talked to her while they danced, making her laugh with another story about a mishap with a stubborn mule. When the song ended and another began, he didn't let her leave the floor. "One more," he said. "Please." They danced 3 more, and by the 4th, Sarah had forgotten to be self-conscious. She was simply enjoying herself, enjoying being held by someone who saw her and wanted her anyway. When they finally took a break, several people approached. Sarah tensed, but Cade's hand at her back was steady. "Kade Dalton, you've been holding out on us," said Tom Miller, one of the other ranchers. "Didn't know you could dance." "Can't really," Cade said cheerfully, "but Miss Sarah here makes me look better than I am." "Evening, Sarah," Tom's wife Ellen said warmly. Ellen had always been kind, one of the few women in town who didn't treat Sarah like she was contagious. "That's a beautiful dress." "Thank you," Sarah managed. They chatted for a few minutes and then others approached. Not everyone was friendly. Mrs. Henderson sniffed audibly and turned away. The preacher's wife made a comment about propriety that was clearly meant to be overheard, but there were more kind faces than cruel ones, more curiosity than condemnation. "You all right?" Cade asked quietly when they had a moment alone. "Yes," Sarah said and realized she meant it. "I'm fine." "Want to dance some more, or should we get some air?" "Air sounds good." They stepped out into the warm night, walking a little ways from the building. The stars were brilliant overhead, the kind of display you only got in the desert where there were no city lights to dim them. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. "For tonight, for all of it." "Nothing to thank me for," Cade turned to face her. "I got to spend the evening with the prettiest woman in town. I should be thanking you." "Cade, I mean it, Sarah. Every time I say you're beautiful, I mean it." "I need you to start believing that." Sarah took a shaky breath. "I'm trying. It's just hard when I've spent so long believing the opposite. I know. He reached out and took her hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. But I'll keep saying it until you believe it. For as long as it takes. What if it takes forever? Then I guess I'll spend forever telling you, he smiled. I can think of worse ways to spend my time. Sarah looked up at him, at this man who had come into her life so unexpectedly and turned everything upside down. This man who looked at her scars and called them beautiful, who made her laugh and made her hope and made her believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved good things too. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. Kade's smile grew brilliant and joyful. Yeah. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears this time. It terrifies me, but yeah. Can I kiss you? He asked, his voice rough. Sarah's heart hammered. Yes. He cupped her face in both hands, mindful of her scars as always, tracing them with gentle fingers before he leaned in. The kiss was soft and sweet, a question and an answer all at once. Sarah's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart racing as fast as hers. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Kade rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Sarah Jane, he said. Scars and all. Especially with the scars, I love all of you. I love you too, Sarah said, and saying it felt like freedom. I don't know how this happened, but I love you too. They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other under the stars. Then they went back inside and danced until the music ended and people started heading home. The ride back to the ranch was quiet again, but this time Sarah sat close to Kade, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. When they arrived, he walked her to the door. I'll see you in the morning, he said, stealing one more quick kiss. 5 o'clock, Sarah agreed. Wouldn't miss it. Sarah floated into the house, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Martha was still up, reading by lamplight. Good evening, she asked, smiling knowingly. The best, Sarah said. Aunt Martha, I think I'm going to marry him. I think you're right, Martha agreed. And high time too. The next months were the happiest of Sarah's life. Kade courted her properly with her uncle's blessing. He took her on picnics by the creek, taught her card games on quiet evenings, helped her with chores while making her laugh. And he never, not once, treated her scars like something to be hidden or ashamed of. In September, when the heat finally broke and the air turned crisp, Kade took Sarah riding to their favorite spot by the cottonwoods. He'd packed a lunch and they ate while watching the water trickle by. Sarah, he said when they'd finished eating, I have something to ask you. She turned to him, her heart already racing because she thought she knew what was coming. Kade pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a simple gold band. I'm not a rich man, he said. I don't have much to offer except a strong back and a willing heart. But I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Would you marry me? Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. Yes, absolutely yes. Kade's whoop of joy startled the horses and sent birds flying from the trees. He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her soundly. And Sarah kissed him back with all the love and hope and joy she'd never thought she'd get to feel. They were married in November, in a simple ceremony at the ranch with just family and close friends. Sarah wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Martha had helped her make, with long sleeves and a high collar that she chose because she liked the style, not because she was hiding. Kade wore his best shirt and looked at Sarah like she was the most precious thing in the world. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kade kissed her in front of everyone, gentle and loving, his hands cradling her scarred face like she was made of something rare and valuable. Robert had offered them the small cabin on the far side of the ranch property, the one he'd built when he first married Martha, and they'd lived there before building the main house. Kade had spent weeks fixing it up, making it perfect for Sarah. When he carried her over the threshold that first night, Sarah looked around at the cozy space and felt tears in her eyes. "Home," she said softly. "Our home," Kade agreed. "For as long as you want it." Forever then. Their first night as husband and wife was tender and sweet. Kade was patient with Sarah's nervousness, gentle with her inexperience. When she hesitated over undressing, embarrassed about the full extent of her scars, he kissed each one he could see and told her she was beautiful until she believed it. "These are part of you," he murmured against her shoulder, tracing the twisted skin with reverent fingers. "And I love every part of you. Never hide from me, Sarah, please. I want all of you exactly as you are." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah kept house for them while still helping Martha with the bigger jobs at the main house. Kade worked with the horses, proving himself invaluable to Robert. In the evenings, they'd sit together on their small porch, talking about their days, making plans for the future. "I want children," Sarah said one night in December, curled against Kade's side while they watched the sunset. "Is that something you want, with you? Everything?" He kissed the top of her head. "How many are we thinking? I don't know, 2, 3. As many as we're blessed with, I suppose." "Sounds perfect." In the spring, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. Kade was overjoyed, immediately becoming protective and fussing over her in a way that was both endearing and exasperating. "I'm not made of glass," Sarah protested when he tried to take over her laundry. "I know that. But you're carrying our baby and I want to help. You can help by not treating me like an invalid. I'm pregnant, not dying." But she loved him for his care, for the way he'd talk to her growing belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about horses and stars and the beautiful, brave woman who was going to be their mother. The baby, a boy, was born in January of 1884 during a cold snap that frosted the desert. The birth was hard, longer than expected, and there were moments when Sarah was terrified. But Kade stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her she was strong enough to do this. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and squalling, Kade cried. Sarah watched through exhausted tears as he held their son for the first time, this big, strong cowboy reduced to trembling awe by a tiny human. "He's perfect," Kade whispered. "Sarah, he's absolutely perfect." They named him James after Sarah's father. He was a good baby, healthy and growing fast. Kade was a devoted father, getting up for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, singing lullabies in his rough voice that somehow always soothed James when he fussed. Sarah watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again, deeper this time if that was possible. "You're a natural at this," she told him one night, watching him rock James to sleep. "I just do what feels right," Kade said. "Love him, keep him safe, let him know he matters. Seems simple enough. You make it look simple." When James was 6 months old, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier, and in April of 1885 they welcomed a daughter. She had Kade's green eyes and Sarah's dark hair, and they named her Catherine, called Kade from the start. With 2 babies to care for and the ranch work to help with, Sarah's days were full and exhausting and wonderful. Kade had become Robert's partner in the horse breeding business, and they were expanding their operation. Money was still tight, but they were doing well enough. "Never thought I'd have all this," Kade said one Sunday afternoon. They were having a picnic by the creek, James toddling around collecting rocks while baby Kade slept in Sarah's arms. "A home, a family work I love. Feels like a dream sometimes." "It's real," Sarah assured him, leaning against his shoulder. "We're real. Best thing I ever did was ask for work at the Johnson Ranch that day. Best thing I ever did was let you see my scars." Kade turned to look at her, his expression serious. You know I never would have given up, right? Even if you'd kept hiding, I would have kept trying to show you that you were worth loving. Might have taken longer, but I would have gotten there eventually. My stubborn cowboy. Your cowboy, he agreed, kissing her softly. Always. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work and love. James grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. Kade was quieter, preferring to help Sarah in the kitchen or the garden, but she had a gift for calming skittish animals that amazed everyone. In 1887, Sarah gave birth to another son, Michael. In 1889, twin girls arrived, Emily and Grace, completing their family of 7. The little cabin had grown over the years, with rooms added as the family expanded. It was chaotic and loud and full of love, exactly what Sarah had never dared to dream of having. She was hanging laundry one afternoon in the summer of 1890, 8 years after Kade had first ridden up to the ranch, when she heard footsteps behind her. Arms wrapped around her waist, and Kade's chin rested on her shoulder. The twins are napping, Michael's with your uncle, and the older 2 are helping Martha make cookies, he reported, which means we have approximately 15 minutes of quiet. Sarah laughed, leaning back against him. Whatever shall we do with such luxury? I can think of a few things. His lips found the scars on her neck, kissing them softly. After all these years, he still did that, still traced her scars with loving touches, still told her she was beautiful. But I actually wanted to talk to you about something. Oh, your uncle wants to retire. He's offered to sell us the ranch, let us take over the whole operation. Sarah turned in his arms. Really? What did you say? I said I needed to talk to my wife first. Kade smiled. It's a big decision. It would mean taking on more responsibility, more work, but it would be ours, Sarah. This land, this life, all of it ours to pass on to our children. Sarah thought about the frightened, scarred girl she'd been 8 years ago. The girl who thought she'd never have a home or a family or someone who loved her. She thought about everything Kade had given her, everything they'd built together. Yes, she said. Let's do it. The deal was made and Robert and Martha moved into town, happy to let the younger generation take over. Kade threw himself into expanding the operation, and Sarah managed the business side with the same skill she'd always had with numbers. They prospered. The Dalton Ranch became known throughout Arizona territory for quality horses. Kade's reputation as a trainer grew, and people came from as far as New Mexico to buy their stock. Through it all, Sarah stood by his side, his partner in every way that mattered. She still had days when the scars bothered her, when she caught someone staring or heard a whispered comment. But Kade's love had taught her something important. Her worth wasn't determined by unmarked skin or other people's opinions. She was valuable because she was herself, scars included. She made sure to teach her children that lesson. When Kade asked about the scars one day, Sarah told her the truth about the fire, about the loss and the pain and the recovery. Did it hurt? Kade asked, her young face serious. Yes, Sarah said honestly. Very much. But I survived. And surviving hard things makes us stronger. Papa says your scars are beautiful. Sarah smiled. Papa sees beauty in lots of things other people miss. It's one of the reasons I love him. The years continued to roll by. James grew into a fine young man who took after his father in temperament and skill with horses. Kade became a talented healer. Studying with the local doctor, Michael showed a head for business that rivaled Sarah's. The twins, inseparable as always, were creative and mischievous in equal measure. In 1895, Arizona territory was changing rapidly. The railroad had brought more people, more business, more opportunities. Winslow was growing, transforming from a dusty outpost into a real town. The Dalton Ranch grew with it, employing several hands and becoming one of the largest operations in the area. Sarah was in the kitchen of their expanded house one afternoon preparing supper when Kade came in and wrapped his arms around her from behind, just like he had that day by the laundry line years before. "Hello, beautiful," he murmured, kissing her neck. Sarah laughed. "You say that every day." "I mean it every day." He turned her around to face him, his green eyes still as warm as they'd been when they first met. There was gray in his hair now, lines on his face earned from years of sun and hard work. But to Sarah, he was as handsome as ever. "I love you," she said, reaching up to cup his weathered cheek. "Thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked away." "I love you too," Kade replied, covering her hand with his. "Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with your heart." His fingers found the scars on her neck, tracing them with the same reverence he always had. "Thank you for being brave enough to believe me when I said these were beautiful, when I said you were beautiful." "I believe it now," Sarah said softly. "It took me a while, but I believe it. Good." He kissed her forehead, then her scarred cheek, then her lips. "Because it's the truth." That evening, with their children gathered around the table, Sarah looked at the life they'd built and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This family, this home, this love, it was more than she'd ever thought possible. After supper, when the dishes were done and the children were settling for the night, Sarah and Kade sat on their porch like they'd done countless times before. The desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked quietly. "Tying yourself to me, you could have had someone without baggage, without scars." Kade was quiet for a moment, and Sarah held her breath, even though she knew his answer. After all these years, after 5 children and countless demonstrations of his love, she knew. But sometimes she still needed to hear it. "Sarah," he said finally, turning to look at her with those green eyes that still made her heart skip. "I told you once that your scars were beautiful because they made you who you are. That's still true, but you want to know what else is true. Even if you didn't have a single scar, even if you'd lived a life completely free of pain or hardship, I still would have fallen in love with you. Because the scars aren't what make you beautiful. Your strength makes you beautiful. Your kindness, your intelligence, your humor, the way you love our children, the way you build people up instead of tearing them down, that's what makes you beautiful." He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "The scars are just part of your story, and I love your whole story, Sarah. Every chapter, every page, every word. I wouldn't change a single thing about you or our life together." Sarah felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were good tears. Happy tears. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Kade corrected. "I asked for work at her ranch 13 years ago, and I found everything I didn't even know I was looking for. A home, a purpose, a future. You." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. From inside the house came the sounds of their children, the twins arguing over something, Michael trying to mediate James and Katie's laughter. The sounds of family, of life, of love. "Want to know a secret?" Sarah said eventually. "Always. Sometimes I'm grateful for the fire." Kade looked at her in surprise. "Really? I know that's terrible," Sarah said quickly. "I don't mean I'm glad my parents died or that I was hurt. I would give anything to have my family back. But the fire and the scars, they taught me something. They taught me who really mattered. Who could see past the surface to what was underneath. They were like a test, I suppose, and you passed it without even knowing you were being tested." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "If I'd been unmarked, maybe I would have married someone who loved me for the wrong reasons. Maybe I would have settled for someone who didn't really see me. But because of the scars, I waited. And then you came along and saw everything, all of it, and loved me anyway. Not anyway, Kade corrected gently. Just loved you, period. The scars weren't something to overcome or look past. They were just part of you, and I love all of you. In the years that followed, the Dalton ranch continued to thrive. James married a rancher's daughter from Flagstaff and took over the day-to-day operations, running things with the same skill and dedication his father had shown. Kade became the town's first female doctor, a position she'd fought hard to achieve. Michael opened a supply store in town that quickly became the most successful business in Winslow. The twins, Emily and Grace, both found love with good men who appreciated their spirits. Sarah and Kade became grandparents, then great-grandparents as the years rolled on. They grew old together, their hair turning white, their faces weathering like the desert landscape they loved. But Kade never stopped tracing Sarah's scars with gentle fingers, never stopped calling her beautiful, never stopped looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. On a spring morning in 1920, nearly 40 years after they'd first met, Sarah sat on the porch of their home, now run by James and his family. Kade sat beside her, his hand in hers like always. They were both in their 60s now, slowed by age but still healthy, still together. "Remember when you first came to the ranch?" Sarah asked, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. "You asked for work and I tried to hide from you," Kade chuckled. "I remember. You wore long sleeves in the desert heat and wouldn't look at me directly. I was so sure you'd leave once you saw the scars. I was so sure I'd finally found home once I met you." He squeezed her hand. "Turned out I was right. We both were," Sarah said. "You did find home, and I found everything I never dared to hope for." One of their great-granddaughters, a little thing of about 5, came running up to the porch. "Great-grandma Sarah, what happened to your neck?" Sarah smiled and lifted the child onto her lap. "I was in a fire when I was young, sweetheart. It left scars." The little girl traced the marks with curious fingers. "Do they hurt?" "Not anymore. Great-grandpa Kade says they're beautiful." Sarah looked at her husband, at this man who had loved her for nearly 40 years, who had given her everything good in her life, who had taught her that she was worth loving. "Great-grandpa Kade is a very wise man," she said. "The wisest," Kade agreed, winking at her. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they'd watched together for decades, Sarah reflected on her life. She'd survived fire and loss and years of believing she was unworthy of love. She'd been told no man would want a scarred woman. She'd been called damaged goods, bad luck, less than. And then a green-eyed cowboy had ridden into her life, traced her scars with gentle fingers and called them beautiful. Had seen past the surface to the person underneath. Had loved her not despite her scars but as a whole person, scars included. They'd built a life together, a family, a legacy. They'd weathered hard times and celebrated good ones. They'd grown old side by side, their love deepening with each passing year. The scars were still there, faded now with age but still visible. Sarah didn't hide them anymore. She wore them like badges of honor, proof that she'd survived, that she'd overcome, that she'd been loved exactly as she was. As darkness fell and the stars emerged, Sarah and Kade went inside together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. Their family was gathered in the large dining room for Sunday supper, 3 generations of Daltons talking and laughing and loving each other. This, Sarah thought as she looked around at her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, this was what the women in town had said she'd never have. A husband who adored her, children who loved her, a family that was strong and happy and whole. They'd been wrong, all of them. The scars hadn't stopped her from having everything. If anything, They'd led her to it, to Kade, to this life, to this love that had sustained her for 40 years and would sustain her for whatever years remained. That night, lying in bed next to her husband of nearly 38 years, Sarah traced the lines on Kade's face with gentle fingers. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice sleepy. "That I'm the luckiest woman alive," Sarah said. "That I have everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed of. That I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today." Kade pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her despite his age. "I love you too, Sarah Jane, my beautiful, brave, perfect wife." "I'm not perfect," Sarah protested. "Perfect for me," Kade insisted. "Always have been, always will be." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms. Two souls who'd found each other against all odds and built a life that was more beautiful than either had imagined possible. The scars that had once seemed like a curse had become a gift, leading Sarah to the one person who could see past them to the treasure underneath. And Kade, the drifting cowboy who'd asked for work at her ranch one hot June day, had found not just employment but a home, a family, and a love that would last a lifetime. In the end, that was the truth Sarah learned and carried with her all her days. Love wasn't about perfect skin or unmarked bodies. It was about seeing someone fully, scars and all, and choosing them anyway. It was about gentle fingers tracing twisted flesh and calling it beautiful. It was about building a life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of grace at a time. And it was, Sarah thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, the most beautiful thing in the world. Years continued to pass in peaceful contentment. Sarah and Kade spent their final decades surrounded by love, watching their family grow and flourish. The ranch that had started with Robert's small operation now sprawled across hundreds of acres, employing dozens of hands and supporting multiple generations of Daltons. On a warm evening in late summer of 1925, Sarah sat on the porch with Kade, now both in their late 60s. The desert air was sweet with the scent of blooming cacti, and the sunset was particularly spectacular, all golds and pinks and deep purples. "Quite a life we've had," Kade said, his hand finding hers automatically, the way it had for over 40 years. "The best life," Sarah agreed. Her hair was white now, her face lined with age, but her eyes still sparkled with the same spirit Kade had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Any regrets?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Not a single one." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You know what I was thinking about today?" "What's that?" "That day you first saw my scars, really saw them when I fell from Juniper. I was so terrified, so sure that would be the end of whatever friendship we'd started building. And instead it was the beginning of everything," Kade finished. "You could have looked away, you could have been kind but distant the way most people were, but you didn't. How could I?" Kade turned to look at her, his green eyes still clear despite his age. "I saw strength when I looked at those scars. I saw survival. I saw someone who'd been through hell and come out the other side still capable of kindness, still willing to hope. That's not something you look away from, Sarah. That's something you hold onto with both hands and never let go." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, even after all these years, after thousands of times hearing similar words. It still moved her, this man's unwavering love. "I'm so glad you asked for work at this ranch," she whispered. "Best decision I ever made," Kade replied. "Well, second best. First best was asking you to marry me." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of twilight. Around them, their legacy lived and breathed. James was in the barn with his own son, teaching the next generation about horses. Katie was in town, delivering another baby, her skill as a doctor renowned throughout the territory. Michael was expanding his business, planning to open a second store. The twins were visiting with their families, filling the house with laughter and love. And it had all started with a cowboy who saw scars and called them beautiful. As the stars began to emerge, Sarah leaned her head on Kade's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his body next to hers. This was home. This was love. This was everything. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For seeing me. For loving me. For giving me all of this." She gestured vaguely at the ranch, the house, the life they'd built. "Sarah," Kade said, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "You gave me just as much. You gave me purpose, family, a reason to stay in one place instead of drifting forever. You gave me love I didn't even know I was looking for. We gave each other everything." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 43 years of love and commitment and choosing each other every single day. When they finally went inside, the house was full of family. Dinner was a boisterous affair with multiple conversations happening at once, children laughing, adults debating, the beautiful chaos of a large, loving family. Sarah looked around the table at all these people who existed because she'd been brave enough to trust Kade's love, because she'd stopped hiding and started living. Every single person in this room was here because a cowboy had traced her scars and called them beautiful. Late that night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house was finally quiet, Sarah stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom. Kade came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Sarah looked at her reflection, at the scars that were still visible despite the years, at the woman she'd become. "I'm thinking that I spent so many years hating these scars, hiding them, letting them define me in the worst way. And then you came along and showed me they could be something else. Something that represented strength instead of shame." She turned in his arms to face him. "You taught me that being scarred doesn't mean being broken, that survival is beautiful, that I am worthy of love exactly as I am." "You taught me some things too," Kade said, his hands coming up to cup her face, his thumbs gently tracing the familiar lines of her scars. "You taught me that the best things in life are worth waiting for. That love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about finding someone perfect for you. That home isn't a place, it's a person." They held each other in the lamplight, two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary. In the years that remained to them, Sarah and Kade continued to live fully and love deeply. They watched their great-grandchildren grow, saw the ranch continue to prosper, celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, and all the small moments that made up a life well lived. When Sarah passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, Kade held her hand one last time, whispered that she was beautiful one last time, and thanked her for 48 years of perfect love. And when Kade followed her 2 years later, his children and grandchildren gathered around to say goodbye to a man who taught them all what real love looked like. A love that saw past scars to the person underneath. A love that chose kindness over judgment, hope over fear, connection over isolation. The Dalton Ranch continued for generations after, each successive family member carrying forward the legacy of love and acceptance that Sarah and Kade had built. And the story was passed down, from parents to children to grandchildren, of the woman with scars who thought she'd never be loved, and the cowboy who traced those scars with gentle fingers and called them beautiful. It became the foundation of the family's values. That true beauty comes from within, that scars are proof of survival, that love sees the whole person and chooses them entirely, that everyone deserves to be loved exactly as they are. The little cabin where Sarah and Kade had started their life together was preserved, eventually becoming a landmark on the ranch property. Future generations would stand there and hear the story of their great-great-grandparents, of how love had conquered fear and shame, of how one man's gentle acceptance had changed a woman's entire life. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the desert sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, ranch hands would swear they could see two figures on the old cabin's porch, sitting close together, watching the stars emerge. Some said it was just shadows and wishful thinking. Others knew it was Sarah and Kade, their love so strong it echoed through the years, a reminder that true love never really dies. It just becomes part of the landscape, woven into the very fabric of the land and the family, and the legacy left behind. A testament to the truth that Sarah learned all those years ago when a green-eyed cowboy rode into her life and taught her that scars and all, she was worthy of being loved. And that love, built on acceptance and tenderness and seeing each other fully, was the most beautiful thing of all.